All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is session 352, One Heart and One Mind, finding ways to bridge the gap despite differences in faith. If you are watching online at home, just remember that you can use the Huba app and submit questions, and I'll make sure that we get to those at the end if there's time. And then in this room, we'll use this. Is there a mic? Oh, there we go. There's the mic right here, and you can do, or you can submit to Huba too. Okay, so this session, with record numbers of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints choosing alternative pathways to spirituality, the distance between believers and non-believers is ever widening and leading to unnecessary pain and misunderstanding. In this presentation, we challenge Mormons and former Mormons to confront their fears with compassion and curiosity, embrace new ways of thinking, and construct healthy relationships with those on the other side. The extent to which we can view the world through another perspective is the extent to which we can heal, bridge the gap, and come to a place of unity. I'm excited to introduce Lindsay and Emily. Lindsay Hyde is a post-Mormon certified life and wellness coach with Symmetry Solutions and is currently working towards becoming a licensed clinical mental health counselor and is the creator of the Happy Exmo podcast. She lives in Denver with her ex-Catholic husband, 4 kids, and 3 stepkids, and 3 dogs. Emily McAllister is a certified life coach with Clarity Point Coaching and the creator of the Explore You Thrive, a program focused on integrating exploration of self with exploration of the natural world. She also lives in Denver with her husband and 3 kids. Hey, floor is yours.
Great. You're good. Got a few technical things we're working through.
Not hearing audio online, so we're doing a quick, real quick check here.
Okay. Well, we want to welcome you to our session today. We're really excited to have everybody here. I am Emily, just in case, and
I'm Lindsay, and I have laryngitis, so we're going to do our best. Pray for me. Okay.
We've been praying a lot. So we really, when we thought of this, we really wanted to talk about what it means for us to really bridge that gap. What are the tools and skills we need to be in a place of intentionality as we bridge the gap between these differences in beliefs and where we find ourselves oftentimes.
So here we were back in the day, 2 Mormon girls living in a Mormon world. These pictures are, mine is on my actual baptism day. Emily's around that same age with the picture of Jesus, showing how spiritual she was.
Yeah.
So, as she mentioned, I'm Lindsay Hyde. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I'm married with 7 kids. But I'm not that Mormon. Only 4 of them are biological children. The other 3 are my stepkids. I do work full-time as a marketing director for a wedding catering company, which I love, and then part-time as a life coach with Symmetry Solutions, which I also love. That's it for me.
Okay. My name is Emily McAllister. I'm also from Denver, and I'm married with 3 kids. I am a life coach for Clarity Point, and I also have my own practice which focuses on working with marginalized members within the LDS faith and the people who love them. And I also homeschool my oldest child until this year, and he graduates, and then we're all free from that, so yay.
Okay, come on. There we go. So we wanted to start with a little bit of our Mormon stories. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, but I was actually conceived in Provo, Utah. So that tells you a little bit about where I come from. My mom, who is a professional genealogist, has actually traced my family history all the way back to the early origins of the church. And Mormonism is in my DNA. So I took one of those Ancestry.com DNA tests, and it actually says that Mormonism is part of my DNA, so that's pretty cool. My ancestors were all polygamists, and they were all pioneers and crossed the plains And even though I was raised outside of Utah, I feel like I had a very Orthodox Mormon upbringing. I did all the things. I was baptized at 8. I went through the trauma of girls' camp. I did it in 3 years so I could get rid of trauma in my life. I got all the young women's medallions. I was seminary president. I went to EFY and youth conferences. And you guys, you can get my autograph afterwards because I was the regional scripture chase champion in Houston, Texas. So that's a cool thing. Thank you. I did also go to BYU. I went on a mission to San Bernardino, California, where I spoke Spanish. I was married in the Salt Lake Temple, and my 4 children were born in the covenant. Oh, goodness. Okay.
Just had to emphasize
Okay.
that.
In the covenant. Things started to kind of crack for me when my twin girls were born, and I had to stay up all night feeding them because there were 2 of them. And I started reading the work and the glory of all things to keep me awake, and I started reading some stuff that I was just really unsure about. So I spent the next 12 years of their life studying and reading and soaking up all the information I could and going to the temple. And basically about 12 years after that, everything kind of fell apart for me, and I realized the Mormon church just really wouldn't work for me anymore.
Okay, and these are my pictures. Just so you know, one of my kids pointed out, I will explain why there's 2 different men that I'm married to. Not at the same time. They were like, that looks like reverse polygamy. I also was born in the church. I had a little bit different upbringing in terms of my grandmother was a convert to the church, joined the church in Illinois, and when my mom was just a baby. And then my dad came actually from a pretty inactive home, although he has a long pioneer history, named after a pioneer, all of those things. He served in LDS mission. They were married and sealed in the temple. And so, you know, I did all my church things. And this is my broody picture from Girls Camp. Went on pioneer trek, did all those things, graduated from seminary, went to Rick's and graduated. And I have been married twice in the temple. Once down here, and now my husband and I have been married for 20 years, and we have 3 kids, and I am active in the LDS faith.
So Emily and I were actually in the same ward when I decided to leave the church. Our kids are all the same age, and we both live in Denver, so we lived in the same neighborhood, which is kind of exciting for people outside of Utah because, you know, that's kind of unique to have someone in your neighborhood that's also in your ward. So we did things like carpool, and we'd see each other around. The ward that we were in seemed honestly very cliquey to me, and I never felt like I quite fit in, and I was always on the outside looking in. But Emily was one person in the ward that always made me feel included and loved and just really safe to be with.
And it's wonderful for me because I get to not only have been friends with Lindsay then, but get to be friends with her now. And we get this awesome opportunity to connect and be together in this professional place, but also keep growing our friendship.
So you're probably wondering, why are we here and why are we doing this together of all things? An active member and a resigned member, I guess I should call myself. The theme for this year's Sunstone is unprecedented Mormonism. And we've both had such interesting reactions from people when we tell them that we're doing this together. So I've told people that knew us both, that were in the ward with us, that have left the church, I said, you know, I'm going to Sunstone, I'm doing this with Emily. And they're like, what? Emily McAllister? Doesn't she still go to church? Like, how could you even talk? I mean, they don't say, how could you even talk to her? But it's kind of implied, like, oh my goodness.
It's been interesting because we were so excited about this and we thought this is so great. And I feel like we model this in our own friendship. And yet I had a lot of pushback as well. And we knew this was the right topic then. Because the pushback I have gotten is I need to be really careful by lots of people. Be really careful about where you're at. And I was like, I know we're in that. I'm great. We're good. So we're hoping that the things we present today will help you as well. in that journey.
I have to add, Emily got a text this morning that said, stay strong. So I'm obviously really evil.
No,
She needs to be careful.
we are not
think
contagious.
it's
I might
hysterical.
get your laryngitis.
Yeah.
You know, that would be bad. Okay. So one of the things we wanted to do in here, because we're both coaches and it's more interactive for us, so we hope you'll participate, the people that are here. What language do you think former believers use? Oh, wait. Sorry, opposite. I'm on the wrong slide. What language do you think believers use about former believers? Think about the language. Apostate, struggling. Yes, we're going to write them. Lost. Weak. Yes. Yes, I've heard that.
Misguided.
Mm-hmm. Selfish.
Sinners.
My least favorite word that I hear is wayward. I hate that word. Everybody, oh. Okay, we're going to switch.
All right, so then what's the opposite of that? What language do former believers use about believers?
Naive.
Oh, that's a good one.
Blind sheep. I'm gonna put those two separate. Can I? Brainwashed. Culty.
That's actually on a later slide, so you're good.
You get a lot of the ones we did.
Also TBM, I don't think that's necessarily negative, maybe, I don't know.
And for those listening who don't know what that is, what is that?
That stands for, I've heard a couple of different things, but usually true believing member or true blue member.
I think that's the nicest.
There might be some other things it stands for that are not as nice. Oh, oh dear. Yeah.
So it's utilizing lots.
Okay, so what emotions do you guys think that these words evoke when you're looking at those words?
I think we took a lot of negative.
Yeah, those are all pretty negative.
I think also.
I think that that's kind of implied by the initial thought with it. Because it's usually relatively negative thing when you're thinking of somebody that has a completely different view and stuff. It's sometimes hard to think of a positive.
Yeah.
Negative.
Any other emotions? Oh, that's a good one.
Angry. I should not have been allowed to write on the board. I heard one back there, what was that, hurt?
Hurt. Yeah.
Okay. Misunderstood.
Oh, seriously. Yeah.
Fear. Lonely. Oh.
Okay. So oftentimes this leaves us feeling like we're polarized on one side or the other of this great divide. Oh, you can't really kind of see the great divide as well up on the screen, but it's like a huge chasm between us. We start to feel this way. Emily and I each took very different paths in our life journey. When we got to a certain point, you know, I kind of veered off to the former believers and she stayed on the path. And that chasm that's created can make us feel so far apart. Because sometimes we'll feel a sudden underlying animosity towards people on the other side of this chasm. or an uncertainty about how we should act. And the thing about this chasm and what we want to talk about today is the ability to build a bridge. Okay, that's much better. Thank you, Natasha. Because the thing is, we would never think to move part of the mountain over to meet us on our side, or move the other part of the mountain. We're not asking anybody to compromise their own situation or their own beliefs in order to come to where we are. That's actually impossible. But if we can build a bridge between the two, then that's what we need to do. But that doesn't involve compromising our own belief system. It just involves figuring out how to create that bridge. Okay, so I'm representing the former believers. So some of the language that we use, we talked about cult is right up there, sheep that we mentioned. I hear a lot of people in coaching that want to burn the whole thing down, and not literally, don't worry. They figuratively, though, they just wish the church was gone. They're so angry. And then I've noticed this a lot, the experiences that we go through. So for me personally, I had a lot of honest doubts. I wasn't looking to go sin. I wasn't looking to, I didn't want to just go drink coffee, yay, and anything like that. It was that I really had a lot of doubts. And as I mentioned in my story, those went on for 12 years of doubting and studying and trying to figure this out and just not being able to find the answers that I needed. And then sometimes we learn new and different information that does not jive with what we were taught. And we're like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on here? Sometimes our values are just not aligned with the church. This happened to me a lot. I would go to church and people would be like, well, don't you feel this way? And I'd be like, actually, no. But I never felt safe enough to even say that. Like, I just felt like I can't tell them how I really feel because I'm supposed to feel this way about certain issues, and I just don't. And then you feel like your entire foundation has crumbled out from underneath you. I have never in my life experienced anything as destabilizing as leaving the church. I literally can't think of words to explain how weird that experience was for me. I'm like, I built my entire life on this, and now it's just gone. It was terrifying. Some of the emotions that brings up, we feel stunned. Like, you're like, what? Like, it's just crazy. I was 40 years old when I left, and I'm like, that's 40 years of my brain thinking one thing and then having to think something else. You feel heartbroken. Your whole life is built on this. You do feel betrayed. A lot of people feel lied to. Like, I didn't get all the information. You could feel disgusted. I often felt disgusted at myself for things I had said and done as a member of the church. There's so much anger, and I have to reassure my clients that is totally normal to feel angry. And then you feel hurt. It's just heartbreaking. And then the fears that we go through, we're afraid of being rejected. That's a huge one because for most of us, the church is our entire social construct. Natasha mentioned misunderstood. You're afraid of being misunderstood because we know what we're taught about people that leave the church is that they either have sinned or that they want to sin or that they're lazy. And those weren't my reasons. And so I didn't want to be misunderstood. You're afraid of losing your family, your friends, your community, which happens to a lot of people. I was so blessed that my family did not reject me, but I lost my entire community in one fell swoop, and most of my friends were gone. And then you're fearing, what now? Like, you've had a roadmap to follow your entire life, and suddenly it's gone, and you have no idea what the future holds and no idea what to do. I remember my mom even asking me, well, what are you going to do if your daughter wants to date when she's turning 16 or before she's 16? And I'm like, kind of, that's the last of my worries right now, but I don't know. I guess I'll figure that out when we get there. Like, I have no idea because I no longer had all the answers.
And I'm representing the believer side. But as we talked a lot about this because I think especially as former believers, you know what's being said, you know what's there, which generates a lot of what Lindsay just talked about. But we wanted to represent this as well because there is that like wandering off the path, wayward. We talked about struggling, apostate, challenging, anti-Mormon. I think that gets thrown out a lot. And there's a feeling of danger. and that the church equals happiness, righteousness versus sinning. We label people. These are kind of those experiences. And then there's that feeling like we need to distance ourselves or ostracize or cease communication, because what is that going to bring into our lives? The emotions I think that I hear the most are, I feel confused, I feel heartbroken, I feel betrayed by this person possibly that is leaving disgusted or angry or hurt. And then the fears, I think, are, what is this going to do to somebody's eternal salvation, that loss of salvation? Or what does this mean for my family? This person may not be with my family, because we have these constructs that we've built around that. And again, what now? What do I do in this space with somebody that I love or care about?
So how do we go about bridging the gap? When I left the church, the ward I was in, the bishop did email me back after I told him I wasn't coming back. And then only 2 other people reached out to me at all. And one of them was Emily, and she invited me over for lunch. And she made this really good salad, because it's all about the food. No, it was really good. And she just sat and talked to me and listened to me. I never felt any ulterior motive at all. I never felt any judgment from her. I never felt like she was at all attempting to bring me back. She just really wanted to see how I was doing. And she was one of the very few people that showed me any compassion at that time of my life. And I think it's just one thing, she's a really special human being that has the capacity to be that way and to treat someone that way, even though I was obviously at this point suddenly on the opposite side of this chasm than she was.
And part of that we really wanted to share with you as well is, and we will probably get emotional during this, because I really love her and think the world of her. But for me in my life, I have come to an understanding that we hope to offer today here as well, that we can stand in a place of balancing paradoxes of this and this that feel maybe opposite, but we're going to try and be in a place of balancing paradoxes. And I've started coming to a point where I have been calling that courageous Christianity. And I tell my kids that's where I hope they will be, is in that place. Because for me, I believe that's where Jesus Christ stands. And that's who I want to move towards. And so that for me was about me standing in a place because I left her, and she was amazing. So,
okay. So, step 1, we want to start this leaning in and coming towards the center by getting clear on what you believe. So you need to begin with yourself and decide, what do you believe, honor your beliefs, and then have clarity, which allows you to be open to other beliefs. So something that's really important to recognize is that there's a difference between what you believe and what you were taught. And oftentimes, those things can totally be meshed together, and that sometimes they are the exact same thing. But oftentimes, they're not. So I think of the way we teach our kids when they're little, especially, well, I don't know, maybe everyone does this, but I know as like a young Mormon mom, I would be like, well, we believe that you don't drink coffee. Well, we believe that when you're 8, you get baptized. You know, it was all we believe, which is a good idea, but it's making this assumption that your kids believe that too. And it's also saying, if you want to be part of this tribe, you believe this too. And it doesn't even ever give them the choice to recognize, well, what do I believe? And I would love if I could have a time machine and go back in time and ask my little kids, what do you believe? I mean, wouldn't that be fascinating to ask little kids, what do you believe? And because they're an open book, they haven't necessarily been taught any of this stuff. So think about that. Like, what we were taught is not necessarily what we believe. And so if that's the case, then you get to start asking yourself, what do I believe actually? Like, look at all these different things that we have beliefs on and recognize, well, is that what I was taught, or is that what I actually believe? It's our human nature to accept things that authority figures or groups tell us as if it is our belief. And that's human nature, but it's not necessarily true all the time. And that is in a religious context and out of a religious context. It's in all different parts of our life. It's politically, it's socially. We just kind of want someone bigger than us to tell us what to think and what to believe, because it's so much easier. It's like that, having that roadmap that I talked about. So I have kind of funny / awkward story. When I was sharing my presentation with my TBM parents the other night, I left this story out. So right after I left the church, I had joined an online Facebook support group for people that left the church. And they're in there chatting one day about masturbation. And I literally had the thought, oh, we believe in that now? Like, I thought that because it was like my whole life that had been like against the rules. As a Mormon, we didn't believe in that. And then I thought suddenly, oh, as an ex-Mormon, apparently we believe in that. But then I stopped and said, no. I get to choose what I believe. I don't need the ex-Mormons to tell me what to believe. I don't need the Mormons to tell me what to believe. But I was still in that mindset of needing someone to tell me what to believe, and I recognized that. And then I got to choose. So remember that you get to choose your beliefs. It's your choice. It's no one else's. So dive in and discover, what do you believe? And then start to honor that and give it power. And it's also okay not to know. There's so many things that I don't know what I believe. I have no idea what I believe about certain things, and that's totally fine because that is my belief. I don't know what I believe about that. That's fine. Own it. But once you have that clarity and you feel strong about what you know to believe or not believe or what you think about things, then it allows you to be so open and curious to what other people believe because you don't feel threatened by other people's beliefs at that time. So it's such a great place to be.
And one of the things that we found was so powerful about this first step is when you get stabilized in your own thinking and your own beliefs, it is that ability, like Lindsay said, to be able to hold that and not feel fearful. And so I always want to ask myself, what fear is coming up in me right now? What am I actually afraid of? What is that fear? Am I afraid of losing something? Am I afraid of giving up ground that I feel like I've already covered? What is it? So one of the things we want to do, we'll go into that,
Okay, yeah.
is go straight into talking about what you may believe.
Okay, so I got this from Natasha Helfer's website, so I'm going to direct everyone there. And we also have a link at the end. But Natasha teaches this great values exercise. And so I'm going to kind of teach you guys how to do it here. And then we have what is it called? A QR code? I don't know. A thing you can scan at the very end that'll have links for you. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, we start with all of these lists of values. And again, we'll give this out to you guys. But you look through this list of values and just go through and circle the ones that resonate with you or that are important to you. Because it's good to get clear on what are your own personal values. Again, not what you were taught, just what resonates with you personally. So you'll go through and you'll circle a bunch of them. Here's my example of a bunch of circled, not the best circles, but a bunch of circled values here. So these are ones that just feel right to you. And then once you circle them, you go through and you group them into different kind of categories. And this, again, is this all on your own? Like you decide how you want this to look. So you go through like abundance, growth, joy, security, freedom, independence, flexibility, peace. Those are all similar in a grouping. So you group them into different groups. And then I went through and circled a few more. You circle the one that speaks the most to you in each group. So freedom, love, mindfulness, well-being, happiness. So those become your values. Those are your core values. And you can go through and do this. And then after you've circled the one in each group, you add a verb and make it into an action. So if your core value is freedom, your action is live in freedom. If your core value is love, seek opportunities to show love. Act with mindfulness. And then you find ways to incorporate those values, statements into your life. So if, let's seek opportunities to show love. Well, there's a million ways you can go through life seeking opportunities to show love. So list them out. Like I will show love, I will be nice to the cashier at the grocery store, or, just different ways to show love. So once you identify your core values, then that's one of the ways you can start to identify what your personal beliefs are, not just what you were taught that your beliefs should be. Okay, so what does this look like in both groups? We want to really point out how this comes across in both sides of the gap. And I have stories about both of them. So a few months ago, the AP from my mission called me on the phone and was kind of chastising me for some of the stuff I had posted on Facebook, which he felt was inappropriate and was like leading people astray. And that was his opinion. And it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, I'll be honest. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is so much more about him than it is about me. Because he could just as easily scroll past anything I post, which I'd like to point out, I'm very careful about what I post on Facebook, and I'm super respectful. So this was definitely about him, and him feeling super defensive about stuff that he was seeing on Facebook that he didn't like. But on the flip side of that, I have some really, really good friends that have left the church that are so angry that they post things constantly that are just full of hatred and vitriol, to the point that my husband, who is a never-mo, as we like to call him, he grew up Catholic, he's had to block these people on Facebook because of the stuff they're writing about the Mormon church, because they're doing the opposite. They're just constantly filling their Facebook feed with hatred because of their defensiveness of their position. So this quote is so awesome. Defensiveness is for people who are afraid that what they have can be taken from them. So as long as you're clear and solid in your own beliefs, that takes away that fear, and that takes away that defensiveness. Okay? So we need to avoid othering. And I know this is a kind of a buzzword these days, but it's so important. It's so easy for us to hate or avoid those that seem different than us. It's easy, or we need to try to see people as individuals and not as a group, and then choose to look for the similarities and the good in people, rather than focusing on every single way that they're different than us. Because most of the time, people are a lot more similar to us than we like to think they are. We need to get rid of this idea that someone or something is different and therefore it is wrong or bad. Someone's personal beliefs are not right or wrong. Your personal beliefs cannot be right or wrong. They just are your beliefs. They're not right or wrong. So stop thinking that way. We need to see people as individuals. So often I hear people say, I'm so mad at the church. The church did this and the church did that, and I'm just so mad at the church. And then I want to stop them and say, well, who are you actually mad at? Is there an individual in the church that you're mad at? Are you mad at Joseph Smith? Because he's dead, so I don't know what we can do about that. Are you mad at the prophet? Like, who are you mad at? And I have them think about individual people that they know that are members of the church, and they're like, well, no, I'm not mad at any of those people. I'm like, you're mad at the institution, and that's okay. But don't lump all church members into this group and just think that they're all so evil because of something that happened to you, because all of those individual people didn't do a single thing to you to make you mad. It was an institution that you're mad at.
Like you did here, we listed our emotions on our other slides. It's interesting because you notice how when we listed the emotions, we didn't throw those out. Nobody threw those out like, well, those are only believers. Those are only, or members, former members. That's not how we threw them out, right? And Lindsay and I, on those slides that we did right after, we actually made those slides separately. And we came up with those, and we thought it was so interesting that what we find are so similar. And where are we in fear? And one of the things that we have talked about, when I was, on January 6th, I was watching television with, I think, a lot of the members of our country. And I was watching these people, and I had so much fear come up inside of me, and I could not figure out like what was happening there, what was happening inside of me. And it was that othering, like I'm sitting here, somebody else is trying to get into the Capitol and do things. And my boss and I were talking about this because she said, you really need to get out of fear. You need to be in a place of love. And I was like, I don't know there's so much fear there. There was so much like these. And it's interesting because she sent me some things to listen to, and one of them was, where can I find this in myself? Where can I find that fear that would motivate me to do that inside of me? What would be the things and the topics, and where would I stand in that place? And it changed everything for me. Because all of a sudden then you get to stand in a place and know, I know what anger feels like. I know what betrayal feels like. I know what these things feel like. Can I connect that with another person?
Okay, so you're probably wondering why I have a bunch of pictures of the Nazis up here now. I guess you guys didn't recognize you were signing up for a history class. Not really. When I was a little kid, I think I was about in junior high, started learning about the Holocaust at school. And I went home and was telling my mom all these things I had learned and how I couldn't believe that these horrible things had happened to these people. And I mentioned something to her about it being during World War I. And she said, no, that was during World War II. And I was like, no, that is impossible, Mom. Because at the time, this was in the 90s, that had only been 50 years before. And I was like, there is no way that an entire country was turned against a group of people because of their religion only 50 years ago. Like, that was impossible for me to comprehend, that could have happened so recently. Well, it turns out she was right. It was during World War II. And I love this quote about this. Anti-Semitism didn't arise out of nothing. There is an ease with which the rhetoric of hatred directed against a particular group can permeate a national discourse and become normal for ordinary people. And I think this may seem like too far-fetched for some of us, right? Or I know I always like to think, well, I wouldn't have joined the Nazis. Certainly I would have been one of the people to stand up for what was right. And I think we all like to think that, but this kind of thing happens all the time when we get caught up in this othering of groups and thinking that they're so different than us. And sadly, our own people have been vulnerable to this in our history. On September 11th of 1857, 150 men, women, and children were brutally murdered by true believing, temple recommend holding if they had temples, I don't know, back then, card-carrying members of the church that absolutely and totally believed in the church. These immigrants were traveling through Utah, they were at the wrong place, the wrong time. They were in Utah at a time when suspicions about outsiders were very, very high. And because they were not members of the church, our own people decided that they must be the enemy. And the men, they tricked them into turning over their weapons, and they shot all the men in the head, and they took the children and the women, and they turned them over to the Indians who hacked them to death. The only survivors were about 17 children that were deemed too young to be able to talk about what had happened, to be witnesses to this. And so the scary thing to me is these people were just like us. They were just normal people, but they had othered this group of people so much that fear came up in them, and they were willing to compromise everything that they believed in and stood for.
As we talk about this, one of the things we have come back to over and over again is this thought: if we can find good in those we've been trained to see as bad, if we can find worth in those we've been conditioned to see as worthless, if we can find ourselves in those we've been indoctrinated to see as other, then we become unable to hurt them. When we stop hurting them, we stop hurting ourselves. And when we stop hurting ourselves, we begin to heal. It comes back to that internal starting here, right? I also think it's very important as we talk about this that a lot of times our fear gets wrapped up in something that feels very good. So we're going to wrap fear up maybe in, but I really love this person. Or we're going to wrap fear up in justice. And we're going to wrap those up because that feels better to us than going in and really saying, I'm afraid. And I want to get to a different place than fear. And I really want to get to love, or I really want to get to that place because they're different, right? But we wrap them in that package.
So this is obviously a new way of thinking about things. to avoid that black and white thinking, to abolish labels from our vernacular. Because when it comes down to it, aren't we all just seekers of happiness and truth? I mean, can't we rejoice in the variety of ways that people have to find happiness and truth? I think that's so awesome. So we need to start listening with curiosity and compassion, and then identify sometimes where someone else is in fear or where we are in fear. Listen to understand their experience rather than listen to defend your own point of view. That's a huge thing. And then accept their experience as fact. Like, how awesome is that concept? Instead of trying to say, well, I'm sure that what you felt wasn't the spirits. It was this chemical reaction in your brain. Why don't you say, oh, that's so cool. You had a really cool spiritual experience. Like, accept their experience as fact. You don't need to change anything about it. It's their experience. Also, we need to get rid of our filters. We all see the world through these filters. And so we'll either take off your Mormon filter, take off your ex-Mormon filter, take off Community of Christ, whatever filter you have, and just listen and be curious about people's experiences rather than thinking you need to kind of make it fit into your own view of the world. You don't. It's their experience.
So one of the worksheets that's going to be included in the QR at the end, and also that is in that packet we just handed out, is about some ways that we can do that. And this is one of those ways. I think oftentimes we carry a lot of stuff with us, and either we come into a situation and we put ourselves in a one-up, I know better, I am better, or a one-down position where, well, I'm not really sure, right? And the goal is to really get ourselves to this, where we're equal, where we see this person as another human being that has the same value as we do. It's equal. And that can put us in a place of being fearless and strong and loving. I wanted to throw out a couple of quick questions with this. If you are looking to be in a place of validation, and when we say validation, we're not saying agreement. We're saying just listening to understand, validating their experience. What are some things you could say if somebody said something that felt different? Any ideas? Or does your own stuff come up? Because my own stuff always comes up. I'm like, wait, let me tell you, right? I want to take that one-up position. It feels so good to be right. So I'm like, no, I really want to just be right here. Yeah.
I appreciate your perspective.
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh, I have to repeat it. I appreciate your perspective. That's a good one. Because that allows whatever theirs is, right? That's a very validating thought. Anything else you can think of?
I like to thank them for sharing it with me.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from kind of a sense of vulnerability, especially if they know that you don't see things the same way.
I love that. So thank you for sharing, because I recognize how vulnerable you are in that space. Yeah. Anyone else?
I think I'm just repeating. So what I hear you saying is this is important to you.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. So I'm going to repeat that. What I hear you saying is this is important to you. That's a great one, because I am listening to what you're saying, and I'm here in this moment to be there. One of the other things we put on there is this concept of, and you'll get to see that in the worksheet, so I encourage you to go through that. What would it look like if I went into these conversations and I just put my personal stuff at the door? And I was just going to be here to meet this person where they are. And I'm going to validate, and I'm even going to ask for permission to share things. I love this thought. It is the hardest thing for me to do. I've started trying to do this, and I always want to just be, well, let me tell you. Let me explain to you, instead of just, could I share something with you? Or would you be willing to hear my side? And maybe that's not where we are. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Nope? Okay. You should probably do it. I'll mess it up. One of the ways that I love this is when personal experience is concerned, we all speak a different language. And a lot of times when I'm working with a client, we have a lot of differences that they want to work out. A lot of times it's like, I want my kids to think this, or I want this. And one of the ways that I have explained this to them is to make whatever that person believes not personal anymore. It feels very personal, especially what we believe about our faith. But if I can couch it in, this is their opinion, this is their belief about something. And so one of the things I've turned this into is, I love pesto. I love pesto. It could go on all the things. I even might argue it could go on ice cream, possibly, with the right combination, just saying. And it's a little bit personal to me, but it's just a condiment. That's it. Although even saying that, I'm like, My husband hates pesto. Like, hates it. Like, knows when I try and sneak it in food, hates it. Like, comes in the house, it's like, did you use pesto on that? I'm like, no, I didn't. I don't know what you're tasting. But he hates it. And if I can put all these differences, because pesto really isn't personal, though. And I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but it works. So I can kind of just say, this is just pesto. That's it. It's how they view the world. It's what they're going to put on top of their stuff. And this is what I'm going to put on top of my stuff. And it's fine. It's just different. It's a different way that we speak. We're looking up here and we have notes. I'm all over the place. One of the things that is so important is to stop seeking outside validation. We seek to change the opinions and beliefs of others to make our own decisions seem right. It's that fear. If somebody else tells us, we feel comfortable. We don't have to sit with any uncomfortable. Our decisions may be right for us, but that doesn't make them universally right. And one of the things that this really was driven home for me is, I told you before, I have a child that I started homeschooling in 7th grade. He's autistic. And it was a better fit for him, like sensory-wise, all the things. And I really wanted support. I really wanted some validation in that. I had 2 other kids in public school, so I went to a homeschool conference, and I was so excited because I was going to be with my people, right, that understood the struggles. And I got to a dinner that night with the keynote speaker, and I was sitting at this table, and everybody was talking about the evils of public school. And how we needed to pull our kids out of public school and how we were going to lose them and all these things. And then the keynote speaker was talking about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to find out who I am. And I'm going to get stoned. They're going to kick me out. I was so scared because I had my foot in both camps. But to them, it was they thought it was a universal right. And for me, there were multiple rights there, which seems a little different than our faith, and yet it's very much the same. And how often do we find ourselves in a place that we just want people to like us and to validate us and to tell us, you made the right decision, good job, right? So it's a very hard place to stand.
So step 2 is that we need to get clear on where we're going. So we started out by getting clear on our own beliefs. And now we need to get clear on where we're going. And I don't mean where we're going physically, and I don't even mean where we're going in life. I'm talking about where we're going in terms of our relationships with people. We need to determine the end result that we desire in these relationships with our friends or family members, whoever it is that we see is on the opposite side of this chasm.
And my favorite analogy for this I came up with because I was driving to Denver to see downtown Denver to see a friend of mine, and I had plugged in her address into my GPS. And so I knew where I was going, the GPS knew where I was going, and I was just gonna follow it, right? And I end up on this little I get off thinking I'm going in the right place. I end up back on the freeway. But it kept rerouting me, kept taking me back to where I had already planned was my end destination. And it occurred to me, one of the things I do a lot with my clients is I ask them, what is your end destination? And by the way, it can only be something you can control. So you can't make your husband do the dishes every day. not in your power, right? What is the end result? And so what then that does is, let's say I want to feel love for this person. That's how I want to feel. That means all the things that I do with this person are going to reroute me back to that. My language, my body language, my actions, everything is going to come back to what I've already predetermined and plugged in as where I'm headed. Now, if I'm going in ready to defend and fight, I think Byron Katie says defense is the first act of war. And think about that. When I'm coming in to defend, we're going to be at war. That's not, hopefully, where we want to be.
So Emily mentioned this, but it's so important. Any desired result has to be within our control. We have no control over other people's actions or their beliefs. So it's time for us to get rid of this savior complex, and that shows up on both sides of the chasm. We do not get to try to save anybody or rescue anybody or bring someone back or open their eyes or anything like that. It's just not our place to do that. Their personal beliefs are not in our control. And so that is so important to keep in mind when we're setting that end destination in terms of where we want to be with someone. We need to know what our motives and our intent are, and they can't be to try to change someone's mind about something. That's not our business, and it's not our responsibility. And we just need to stay in our own lane and perhaps find love as our end destination, or understanding, or compassion, or something along those lines. Because you're not going to change them, and you shouldn't be trying to.
The way we save ourselves is by learning to love others. So we have this great analogy that Lindsay's husband shared with us, so I just want to give due credit, but because we really liked it. What if I had gone to the swimming pool and I'd been planning all week, and I was just going to go sit by the side of the pool, and I was going to read and relax and just catch some sun, not planning on getting in the water at all, just going to hang out, and that had been my plan. That's where I was headed. That's where I'd been looking forward to. And all of a sudden, someone I know comes and is trying to guilt me, shame me. Come on, why'd you come to the pool just to sit on the outside? Why don't you get in? Come on. And then tries to forcibly move me somehow into the pool. I mean, we can all look at that and think, not cool, right?
And really kind of annoying and ridiculous. Right? On the flip side of that, I used to do triathlons, and I would have to get up super early in the morning and train. And so I would swim laps, and I would brave the cold water and dive in, and then I'd time myself, and I'd be swimming laps back and forth and back and forth. And so I can only imagine how seriously infuriated I would be if someone looked at me swimming laps and decided, oh my gosh, she's drowning, and dove in and pulled me out of the pool and tried to save me from something I didn't need to be saved from. And so we're just going to leave those great analogies for you guys to ponder.
It's a good analogy, right? Oh my gosh, I'm like stepping on a pen, sorry. We want to focus on what is in our control and lock that in, and then offer that not only to others but ourselves as well. So what would that look like? With our language and feelings, we could say, I want to offer them compassion because I want to feel compassion. I want to offer love because I want to feel love, because we get to determine how we're going to feel. I want to offer trust or faith or peace or understanding, whatever that is, because that's how I want to feel. And then our actions end up being, hopefully, curiosity over criticism, openness. We're more present. We're vulnerable. You use that word. I love that word. We honor agency. That is a big one for me. I always want to honor somebody else's choices. That's huge. Learning to validate, choosing language that's unifying. One of the things we talked about just a few minutes ago, before we came in here, was these terms that we used at the first, right? Like wayward and cult and all of those. How could we just start changing that language? And I would be interested to know what you guys think. One thought I had was, what if I just said, like, if it was my child, this is just my child who's making different choices than I thought they would. That humanizing. What are some language that we could use that would ditch the savior complex and unify?
So like reference to the child
Or another person, yeah. Or even the words we use. We use those about other people, right? In chats or whatever.
I think just like anything with uncertainty, like a little bit of uncertainty, and like you lose like all of the bite.
Yeah, a little dose of uncertainty, you lose the bite, right? And how can we humanize? This is a person that thinks this. That's a different thing than putting it in this dangerous category of occult or anti. I also don't care for that word a lot. Or wayward, because there's a dangerous feeling to that when we say that. So how do we bring it in and unify and harmonize? What would that look like? And our language could change everything, right? Yeah.
I like the word community and village more so than tribal.
Mm-hmm.
Saying you're part of my community because I'm talking to you, help you influence me, and I appreciate what you contribute in my life, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Build that bridge.
So for those online, the comment was about building community and recognizing community because that is inclusive. And I think to your point, it allows for a group and a difference as well. Because when I think of a community, I think of lots of different components to that. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay. And again, this is just another kind of way for us to look at this. What is actually in the circle of my influence? What am I responsible for? And really, it's just this. My words, my actions, my behavior, my effort, my choices, and my ideas. How somebody within, as a believer, like when I look at somebody, how they choose to wear the garments, guess what? Not my business. Whether or not their cup might have coffee in it, not my business, right? How they choose to parent their children, not my business. Not even in my influence of control, just this. And that is a powerful place to stand. When you recognize you are responsible for you and your own saving, whatever that looks like. You get a lot of me right now, sorry. We found this because my sister, she's amazing, and she will always say, anything beyond love is above my pay grade. So people will say things, and she's like, sorry, that's above my pay grade. And that's all she'll say. Like, judgment, above my pay grade. Love, that's what I'm bringing to the table. And it really is the bridge between us and everything. And it feels simple, but it also can be hard to get to because we have to overcome our fears, right?
So this is interesting. While we were preparing this presentation, I happened to come across this quote on Facebook. Actually, Lindsay Hansen Park put it on her page. Your capacity to allow people to live a truth completely opposite to yours without shutting off your compassion for them is a reflection of how powerful your love is. And I just found that to be so profound and so beautiful. Because to me, that exemplifies what Christ-like love really and truly is. It is loving people where they are, not where you think they should be, not where, you are. It's where they are, and just loving them unconditionally right there. Christ, whether or not you believe he was a historical figure or the savior of the world or not even real, I love what he taught. And his teachings are profound truths and eternal truths, I believe. And he never asked people to behave in a certain way in order to qualify for them to be healed. He did not ever put conditions on his love for people. He just loved everyone, no matter who they were, no matter what they were doing. He loved everyone. And the sad thing is, when I saw this quote and absolutely loved it, and so I was scrolling through and saw the comments, and one of the comments made me so sad because it was just missing the mark. So I wrote it down so I have the exact comment. It said, I'm struggling to love friends and family who choose not to get vaccinated. And I thought, oh gosh, you're really going to say, I'm hoping this person was speaking in hyperbole. I really hope they're not actually struggling to love their family members who are making different decisions than they think they should be. But I think we all need to really check ourselves here and make sure, how are we loving? How are we showing up with our friends and family members? And, whose example are we following in that? And who do we want to be? How do we want to show up? Okay, so step 3. So we had step 1, get clear on our beliefs. Step 2, get clear on where we are going in terms of our relationship. Step 3 is get clear on our responsibilities. So now is when we really get to dive into that circle of our influence and start staying in our own lane.
So it's really about asking what is our motivation and what is driving our actions. And at any time, we are going to be in one of two places. We're either going to be in fear or we're going to be in love. It's really that simple. It doesn't feel that way. I know that. And we have to identify whether it's fear of failure or fear of loss. What am I so afraid of? And for me, I learned this with my son. And I asked him if I could share our story because it put me on a different trajectory in terms of where I was in everything. So when my son was 13 years old, I went into his bedroom. We were getting ready for church. He was not ready, which was a common thing. And I found him in his closet crying, and he was really upset. And I said, "Can you tell me what's going on?" And he said, "I can't tell you because it will break your heart." And I said, "Okay, did you kill somebody?" He's like, "No, I didn't do that. I would never do that." I was like, "Okay, good. What did you do?" Because I kept thinking, what did he do, right? And I had a million scenarios that I had prepared myself for. And I had one that I was not prepared for, which was, I don't believe in God. And I went, "Wait, what?" Just a slight hesitation. And I said, "Okay, I need you to get your clothes on and we're going to go to church." And for the next week, I went to God and said, "Okay, I'm going to do all the things. I am going to make him." And I want you to listen to the words. I'm going to make him. I'm going to force him. I'm going to make sure he does all of his things. I'm going to make sure. And I kept getting the thought, get out of my business. Love him. I was like, no, I don't think you understand. I'm here for the long haul. I can do this. I am strong and I am capable and I can do. And I spent a week just for me going to the temple and praying and fasting and doing all the things that I thought would get me the answer that would fix my fear. When really the only choice I could make was, am I going to stay in fear with this child, or am I going to step into a place of love and trust and believe in his capacity and his journey and who he is? I stepped into love and trust with him. And it has made all the difference. He's 18 now. He's a little punky. He still likes to cop back at me and, do all those things. He's got a mouth on him. It's fine. But where we are and where he is, because I was able to step into love, I really believe this. I get to see him figuring out what he believes and living in integrity with his beliefs. And it is powerful to watch. It is amazing. He is one of the best people I know because he has done the work to figure out what he believes. It is not in the LDS faith. He told us in February, we've been going through this for 5 years, and we've accepted it, both my husband and I, and he told us, "So I'm not really a member of the church anymore. I don't affiliate." And we said, "Yeah, we know." We got that. And he was scared to tell us a little. He said, "I thought that you might stop loving me." And I was like, there's nothing ever that's going to change that. So when I talk about this, I know where that fear was. I thought I was failing as a mom, and I was terrified of loss. What is this going to mean for my family? What is this going to mean for his eternal salvation? I asked those questions. And what I found in that was I could stay in that camp, or I could just move into love. And I trust him with his own life. And I trust that I can show up for him. So I don't tell that as a kumbaya story. But I believe this. I believe these principles. I see them work. And I really hope that we can offer them to you and that they can work for you. This stage does not like me. The other thing is knowing our stewardship. According to Merriam-Webster, stewardship is the conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. I think sometimes we get this a little confused. And we really want to go back to that, what can I control, right? And my mother, having come from a convert home, she really questioned everything. And she would always say, is that your stewardship? She used this word a lot. Is that your stewardship? No, get out of it, stop. And she questioned everybody. And so I really have honed into this, like, none of your business, stay out of it, totally my business. And the best quote I've ever heard that ties into this is Byron Katie said there's 3 types of business. There's our business, other people's business, and God's business. And we need to stay out of God's business and other people's business. It's staying in our own lane. And to me, that's the same. What is my stewardship? Me. That's it.
And I think a lot of times when we think of the word stewardship, to me, that has a very Mormon feel to it. But I like to still continue to claim it, even though I'm no longer a member of the church. But I think we often think about stewardship in terms of our kids, for those of us that are parents. Well, yeah, but I still have a stewardship over them, and I still get to tell them what to do. Well, that's true to a point. Obviously, we want to keep our kids safe. But really what we want to do is model good behavior to our kids and then watch as they grow and develop and learn to trust their own beliefs and develop those own beliefs. So here is a picture of my daughters, you guys. This is my daughters on their baptism day. And those, it's still hard to see. Those are my little goth girls now, which is like, let's see, they're 17 now, so however many years difference that is. And I think the most important thing of these pictures to think about is those are the exact same girls. They're the same people inside. Back when they were 8 years old and all wearing white and smiley and happy, and now the brooding teenagers that they are, they're the same people. And they know that I have unconditional love for them, and they've watched me leave the church and model this openness and ability to choose my own decisions and to choose my own beliefs, and they've been able to do the same thing. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, when they started like tattooing themselves or, wanting to get weird piercings, I was a little concerned. I joke, but like literally small children have run away from them in fear in the grocery store because sometimes they look so strange. But they're the sweetest girls, and I love the fact that they feel so safe in our home because they know that there's unconditional love, that they are free to be whoever they want to be. And right now, it's little punk rockers, and that's totally fine. But they're free to be themselves. And that's what's in my stewardship. My stewardship is to let them have that choice to choose their own beliefs, and obviously to keep them safe and feed them occasionally.
Maybe. So we just wanted to sum up. Standing as one is really about getting clear on what we believe first. And that may take a while. I think sometimes that is the biggest part of our journey. What can we do there to get really grounded? Then get clear on where we're going. And again, that's not on the where we're going with, we're going to the temple or we're doing this. This is clear on how we want to show up with someone. Where do I want to be with people? I always tell my kids, I'll always say, how do you want to feel at the end of today? How do you want to feel? Not what are you going to do today? How are you going to feel? And a lot of times they'll say, I want to feel calm. Okay, what is that going to do through the day? How can I get to calm? So every time they're like, no, I want to feel calm, I'm going to do actions that get me to calm, right? And with other people, that's where how do I want everybody? For me, I want people to say I'm a kind person. When people say you're a kind person, I'm like, yes, I did. I hit my destination. I'm not always. My kids would argue I'm not, but other people too. But that's where I really want to be with people. The last one, to get clear on our responsibility, that's about looking inward. Where is my circle of influence? And is it my job to control this? No. If it's not my own actions, my own words, or all those things, I got to stay in my own lane.
So we promised you guys, this is the QR code for those of you guys that are watching online, or we also have handouts. But this is the QR code for all of the coaching techniques that we worked through today. So I'll give you guys a second to do whatever you do.
And I think you guys can take pictures as well if you want these, and they'll take you to the actual PDFs that you can use. So you can take a picture of this.
So while you guys are doing this technological thing, we just wanted to point out that this is totally possible. Like, it is possible to, obviously, look, we're still friends. We're on opposite sides of the chasm. It works. Like, it doesn't have to be this big deal that we seem to think it is. It doesn't need to be that way. And it's up to us. And we also recognize that a lot of times you'll feel like you're the one building the bridge and the person over here is not moving. I hear that all the time. And how hard that is to feel like you're the only one making this effort. And we understand that that's an issue. And all I can say is just keep making the effort. Don't stop reaching out and treating people with kindness and love and compassion. I think that's our job. And that's our way of keeping our side of the road clean, doing what we need to do, and being able to go to sleep at night saying, you know what, I've done all I can do. If this person isn't willing to meet me, then that's their deal at this time. And fingers crossed that at one point they'll recognize that it's much better to just find a way to bridge that gap than to stay on this polarized opposite sides. Because the last thing I think any of us want are all of our relationships to feel so damaged because of a difference in religious beliefs. Like, that's just kind of going against a lot of religious beliefs, right? So let's find a way to bridge that gap, and it's totally possible.
Yeah. And I think one other thing along with what Lindsay said that's really important is recognizing you can offer love and still have boundaries. And you mentioned something about being vulnerable earlier, which I think is a real key thing. I love where Brené Brown talks about how there are going to be people in the arena with us, and there are going to be people in the stands. And we don't have to necessarily be vulnerable with the people that are in the stands, right? But I can still offer love. So for me, that's always the trick, because I have toxic people in my life. I know we all do, right? People that reach out in toxic ways. So how can I set a loving boundary but still offer this? What would that look like? How can I still offer who I am but have a boundary? And for me, it's always identifying, is this person in the arena with me right now? Maybe not. They're probably in the stands. So I'm just going to smile and be nice, right? And then when they're ready to be vulnerable, what if they come into that space? Then I'm already there open and waiting. It takes work. It takes a lot of dealing with uncomfortable. We have to deal with uncomfortable to do this. And the greater we get at dealing with uncomfortable, the more successful we're going to be in managing our own stuff. It's pretty awesome.
So yeah, now we'll open it up. I'll put this QR code back up. We'll open it up to any questions you guys might have. If you have a question, come up to this microphone so then the online people can hear your question.
I think you might have to repeat it anyway, so maybe since we're
Oh.
small, we can just
Okay, cool. So you can just raise your hand if you don't want to come up. That's fine too.
Yeah.
I have one.
Yes.
So I would love to hear you talk about privilege, because that's where this gets like so messy for me. Like this makes me feel better. Like, I like the idea that like I'm only responsible for myself and like people just have to figure their own stuff out. But the nagging thought in my head is like, but I have like all this privilege. Like, I am straight and white and in the church, and like, what does that mean stewardship. Like, it feels like maybe part of that stewardship is like fighting for people who don't have the same privileges, you know? And so, but I also like recognize that tension, like that I do want to control people. Like, I want to make everyone do what I think is the right thing. So would you talk about that? Like, how do you reconcile like privilege and just taking responsibility for your own?
I can do it. I'll take on privilege. I am also, and we've talked about this, we both stand in a place of privilege because of where we are, right? And for me, it comes back to what we talked about before with the values, because I think there are going to be lots of people, regardless of where you stand on this divide, that are going to be led to different places in standing up. Do we need to stand up? Yes. What does that look like? I think that gets to be different for every person, would be. And there's so many places that we need to stand in right now. I feel like there's so many places that need representation. What can we do to stand in that place? And I do think it comes back to figuring our own stuff out first. I do think every person that gets their own stuff figured out first can then go and step into that space. So as an active member of the church, what am I going to do? And I'm working that out right now. I'll be honest. I'm working out what that is. I'm getting really clean on my stuff. And then I have just realigned my whole coaching program to meet this, because this is a place I can stand and lift and help and hopefully get to that place where it's not that one up, one down, but a place of that equal. How can I meet everybody at that spot? I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. There was another.
I had more of a practical or a question about how to practically apply some of this. I know in a lot of instances where we need to meet and what we need to do, but I grew up with the savior complex, and that's something that's very difficult to break away from.
Sure.
When I was an active member of the church, I chastised my sister for drinking herbal tea. And I fell into that a little bit when I left as well. So when you're seeing something, or you're seeing something that is so different from what you believe, and you're finding yourself in the savior complex, what are some day-to-day things that you do, some practical strategies that you do to help yourself break out of that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've always kind of lived my life with, mottos, I guess, is you catch more flies with honey. So I feel like it's always better to take a soft approach to people rather than come at them like chastising them, or I don't know, you mentioned, so have you left the church now? So I think, oftentimes we'll see people in the church and we have this desire to like tell them everything, because how could they believe this, that's like the least effective thing you could possibly ever do, So I think I just always try to step back, and I do try to put myself again in their place and remember, okay, I used to believe that, and have respect for people's beliefs, but also just living like a happy life and showing people like, look, I'm totally fine, I'm happy, rather than trying to tell them everything, just stepping back and showing them. To me, I think has been a very effective approach. But that's also super like my personality. I'm very non-confrontational. So I just tend to be like, let's all be happy.
I found myself in a lot better place religious-wise, but in like situations where I've never believed this. I see it as possibly even harmful. Running into that situation, like in particular that one Facebook post that you mentioned about people that aren't vaccinated and stuff like that. I think that's kind of the hardest part I found. Like, obviously loving them and understanding that, but finding that reconciliation so that you can still be a part of their lives, and you can still have the good, or see the good in them, and not try to save them or have the savior complex, because I found that doesn't work.
It doesn't.
Yeah. And I think I think that's kind of why we talked about it. And we tried not to get too political, but this is so prevalent in our society these days, because everything seems to be just so polarized no matter what we're talking about. And it's hard. And I think the media in particular really stirs that up in us and makes us feel like so like vindicated for, fighting for the right no matter what we think. But I think it's just super important to always remember to go back to, okay, that's what they believe. And beliefs aren't necessarily right or wrong. Even if I believe that vaccination is right or wrong, other people, it's their belief. And so it just kind of and also what Emily talked about, like taking the emotion out of it. If you can make it be, that's their pesto, as hard as that is, and something that you believe so strongly, you have to just take the emotion out of it and back off from the emotion and just be like, it's just not a big deal. It's their thing. I know it's hard if you really feel like that person's in danger, if they're not going to get vaccinated or whatever. That is a hard place to be. But again, it's your circle of influence is really just you. As hard as that is, you have to just bring it back to, okay, I can only control these things in my life, and I just have to be okay with it. I have these clients that I'm coaching now. It's a couple that have both left the church, and their teenage kids are all still in the church. And their teenage kids will come home from church every Sunday and get all preachy and, judgmental and telling them all this stuff. They'll talk to the younger kids about how their parents are wayward and off the path and all this stuff, and it's causing so much contention and just, it's really dividing their family. It's causing all kinds of problems. And the parents are just like at their wits' end with this situation. They're like, I'm going to forbid them from going to seminary and blah, blah. And I said, you know what? The first thing you're going to have to do is you have to accept that they might never, ever change. They might never leave the church. And you're going to have to accept that and love them for where they are. And that's, I think, the hardest place for us to get when we believe something so strongly. Everyone has to get vaccinated. You believe it so strongly. We have to accept. Some people are not going to get vaccinated. It just is what it is. And just love people for where they are. No matter, it's hard. I'm not saying it's the easy thing to do, but I think that's the first step is just letting go because we don't have control. And we're all control freaks, I think, a little. My husband likes to say control enthusiasts, but I don't know. I'm a control freak, all of them.
Can I just add to that, kind of add on to what Lindsay said? One of the reasons why I really wanted to include that validation communication piece is because, and I've been listening to a lot, that they're talking about how research is even showing that the best place to start communication is not going in defending our beliefs. And so I love the last two parts of that you'll find in the QR things that we sent. It talks about listening, right? Curiosity. Not criticism. And it's hard because I know all my stuff comes up. And I'm like, I maybe could have been a lawyer because I'm like, for sure, let me defend that point. Let me defend this point. Let me take that on. When I do this, I'm practicing it. I'm not very good at it. I'm practicing it. What I see is then I get to a point, and the last two things is, would it be willing if I shared my thought with you? And what that has done is that person has been allowed to figure out their own thoughts and lay them out there in a very open and vulnerable way. And then they're more responsive to hearing me because it's not defensive, it's a discussion. And I can't remember what I listened to, but we were talking about it the other day, my sister-in-law and I, that they're seeing that this is the best way to talk about hard subjects. And then focusing on what we're going to do in the future. Like, how could you and I show up in this place in the future? But for me, that's the practical thing. I actually have that on my phone, and I actually read that every single day because I am very good at arguing and defending my own stuff, and I get really passionate about things I'm really passionate about. And so I'm like, I'm going to go in and defend and stand up for. And so learning it is an uncomfortable place for me to stand. Super. And so I'm trying to balance that. And I'll throw this out. My daughter just did this on her own, a little screen addiction course on the Calm app. And she was telling me, they tell you on there that you have to sit during the day and just be bored and feel the uncomfortable. And I came home the other day and she's just sitting there and I was like, do you want to do something? No, I'm trying to be bored and uncomfortable. I was like, well, when you're bored, you could do something. No, I'm trying to process uncomfortable. I was like, oh my gosh, she's like 16 and better than I am. And she's doing this every day. And I was like, what a great skill. It's the same. How can I process that uncomfortable? What am I afraid of? Where am I going to go? Process. Where am I going? Love. That's where I want to show up. So I don't know if that answered between us. Okay. And
Lindsay, since you're on this side that I'm on, I thought the church I never had an anger phase. Okay, none of my family were Mormons, so there wasn't any baggage that way. But when I look at or listen to what you say, in my own experience, I have a lot of friends, and I never turned on them. I just lost my faith in Mormonism, and so the little small group of people that I associate with that are still Mormons are a bit nuanced. I mean, temporary and bipolar. And then I look at your relationships, and obviously you've had multiple marriages in the temple, and you've done so you've been up by your own faith, and so that's made you nuanced. And so it looks like you're obviously a nuanced Mormon.
thank you.
What happens with what happened? I mean, obviously we're sending you sympathy cards because you're going to go to Sunstone and you're going to speak with Lindsay. But so does it work? I mean, God, it works, Lindsay, with people that are so stalwart and whatever that because their own church is teaching them that you're not going to get this in Sunday school. The leaders are telling them that anybody who sides with over here is lazy. So you've been othered by the whole church and by your leadership structure. I don't know. Does it work with people that aren't nuanced?
That is a really, really good question. I'm glad you asked that. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really, as I said, most of my friends that were in the church completely kind of abandoned me. And so the friends that I have kept, I would say, are definitely more nuanced. But on the flip side, I have not made much of an effort to reach out to a lot of those people. I felt like a lot of my relationships in the church were kind of superficial. So the ones that I've continued to have were the ones that were deeper to begin with. And maybe those people were maybe there's a reason that I seemed to gravitate towards people that were more nuanced at the time. But that is a really good question, and I'd kind of like to investigate that more and see what would happen if I started reaching out more. I mean, I'm definitely Facebook friends still with a lot of members, and we actually had a member of my previous ward, her ward, text us right before we started wishing us luck. So, I think there are some that are definitely supportive and okay with things, but I wonder the people that are really, really stalwart, I guess, it is harder, I think, for sure. I have to say that we practiced the other night in front of my dad, who's on the High Council, and he was taking notes for his next High Council Sunday talk from our thing. So maybe this message will spread, and we'll find it easier, because I think both sides of the chasm need to hear this message for sure. But I think Sunstone is a little bit scary for people that are on really far on that one side. So it's harder to get the message out to them, I think. So good question, Brad, and I don't think I answered it at all. But
Can I add something that may or may not be? But as she was talking, I think it comes back to maybe what you said before. What does this look like being maybe in those polarized areas? Because those are very polarized. They're not going to, those very orthodox on either side, I think, are very hard to move, right? And find how we can be more nuanced. I am finding for myself, this is where I get to stand in a different place, in those groups, in that community, and stand up and represent and say, actually, I have been serving in my ward in Young Women's Calling, and we had our presidency meeting with our group of 16 to 18-year-olds, and we asked them to educate us on what the pronouns were of the girls in our class, because I'm not sure. And I want to stand in a respectful place of that. And our president and I had, well, she wasn't there, but she and I talked about this before. We talked about what do we get to do? How do we get to be in that space? And so even little things that we can do, can you educate us on this? Can you help us better understand what do you want to be called? Even that simple, I think that's the place of privilege I stand in. And how can I utilize that in a place of maybe shifting some underlying, fears? Because I really do believe when we stand in orthodox places, those polarized places, we stand in fear. That's my 2 cents, not like a really super, yeah.
I don't know, Emily. You're going to get excommunicated.
When I joined the church, my family's all in the medical chair, and they don't like Mormons. And so I spent 35 years proving to them that I wasn't trying to convert them, and that I was okay, and I didn't have the plague or whatever. And unfortunately, my parents died before I went to tell them that they were right, I was wrong. But then I have some friends that were very important to me in the church, and I had wonderful experiences in the church. I don't have animosity with them. I've reached out, I've tried, but it's that sense. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, he's got an agenda or whatever. And my only goal is just that we can socialize, or we can say something. A group of people that I socialize with every month, and they socialize without me now because I don't know. I've been other, I guess. And I'm not bitter. I'd love to go in there and talk. And our conversations weren't really religious.
Well, I think you just proved the entire need for this, right? That's why this is so important. And not everybody's going to be on the same page of moving in that direction. But what happens as we start to? It allows for greater pathways, greater opportunities. So I think, excellent.
I say just keep trying. That's what I meant. Like, just keep on trying, and hopefully eventually they'll recognize that you don't have ulterior motives. That you just...
I was waiting for the part where you said, well, it's been 7 years, screw 'em.
No, I don't think we should ever give up. I really don't.
That's how you do this presentation.
No, not this presentation.
That might be another one.
Yes.
So, I don't know, this is more of a comment than a
It's
question.
going to be quick. We're out.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to just point out that with some broad issues like vaccination, it's really a challenge because
Yes.
if not enough people do it, it doesn't actually work. I just wanted to point that out, that what that may mean is a major actual dying in the light and sort of falling into chaos and decadence and degradation, and like a lot more work for humanity to get back to a point where we are united enough to actually, follow those guidelines. So anyway, it's worth recognizing that maybe we need to fight really hard for that, even if, with whatever means we have at our disposal. And maybe there are some situations that are important enough that we do have to make it certain enemies if it has to be done. I'm just throwing that out there. Muddy water.
No, and I do think there are definitely certain things that I would stand up for no matter what. I would, to me, LGBTQ rights is a huge deal, and I would definitely lose family members over fighting for that. So I do think that kind of goes back to the values exercise that we have in there as well. Deciding what your own values are and being willing to fight for those things. That's certainly important.
And I think a lot of what we're talking about is relationship building,
Right.
which is different too, right? So, but thank you for that, because that is a point that I think is important to me.
Lindsay and Emily.
Thank
Thank you very much.